Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the Bodega Cat Book Club Financial Edition, and this is an introduction to a new book that we will be starting very soon. Please make sure to sign up for our YouTube channel and subscribe and hit the notification button so that you can be notified of the new book that we're starting. Or you can sign up for our free newsletter. We have information about how to sign up and when the new book's going to start and all that stuff. So whatever works for you. So this book, oh, okay. So before we begin, just a little plug. Like I said, we have a YouTube channel, so please check that out and subscribe. And we have other book clubs that you can join. So consider come joining us in those book clubs as well. On Mondays, we have our spiritual book clubs where we read spiritual books. On Wednesdays, we have our health book clubs where we read books related, health related. And then, of course, this particular book will be on Thursdays, uh, where we read financial books. And we put all the books that we've read, uh, past books that we've read, as well as current books on YouTube. So please check that out and check out our other things that are happening on YouTube as well. If you have a book that you would like to recommend us to read, I will put a link in the description box below. And it could be any book, whether it's spiritual, financial, or health related. We love to read and we love to hear what you have to say and any recommendations that you have. And like I said, sign up for our free newsletter to find out to keep up to date for all things Bodega Cat related. And if you want to support us further, I appreciate that very, very, very much. You can buy me a coffee, leave a donation, check out our merch. We have a lot of merch on our website under the shop tab for both your fur babies, your dogs and cats, pets, as well as humans. And then if you're local in the Los Angeles area, or if you're traveling to LA, or visiting LA, come see us in person. We have a healing center that we use technologies based on Nikola Tesla's scalar wave research for holistic healing for both animals, domestic cats and dogs, as well as humans. So you can find out all about that. All the information is on our website and as well as our other services as well. So you could check it all out. And, please like and comment and subscribe and all that good stuff. And I'm very excited about this new book, actually. This book is inspired by, well, it's inspired by two things. Number one, it's about inspired by the financial things that are happening currently, current events, I guess you could say, in the financial arena. In particular, about precious metals, gold and silver, and what it's doing. So it's very interesting to say the least. This is 2026. So we're in the beginning of 2026, and a lot of movement is going on in the precious metals world. So that's inspiration number one. And then the second inspiration is fundamentals. Heard of um, you've heard of a lot of sayings about how gold is God's metals or God's currency. Constitution talks about gold and metal as currency only, gold and silver as the only currency, things like that, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So I think it's important yeah, I'm big on fundamentals and I'm big on education for those of you who have followed me for a while. And and there's at the very least, you have to be curious as to why gold and metal and silver and precious metals is so valuable and so important. And gold is one of the big granddaddies of it. And also, I guess my third inspiration would be history. You have to know your history. And I'm particularly interested in hidden histories, histories that are not common knowledge, if you will. backstories and things of that nature that you have to kind of dig in a little bit. And so this book is inspired by all of that. Okay. So I've had this book for a while. I started reading it and then I abandoned it. So I'm very excited to have to, having to jump back in and reread it again, or at least reread part of the book, right? So this book is called The Gold Warriors, America's Secret Recovery of Yamashita's Gold. And the author is Sterling and Peggy Seagrave. And I love the image on that picture. It's two swords with gold bars. All right, so I'll leave a link in the description box below if you wish to purchase the book or check it out. And this is the introduction. So we'll be reading author's note as well as prologue. And I am very excited. Okay, so as you can tell, my book is already kind of falling apart here a little bit. It's very delicate, isn't it? If there is a hard copy, it would be good to get a hard copy, but I don't know if they have it. But anyways, this book has very small print, so I'm going to move the camera in a little bit here. Oops, not away, in. Okay. Now this is interesting. It starts with the cast of main characters, almost like a play. Talks about who's who in the zoo and who the players are and things of that nature. So we'll go through it because it's a big cast. And then also the author has annotations or footnotes or endnotes or whatever you want to call it at the end of the book, at the back of the book. And so what I've done is I've highlighted the things that they talk about at the end of the book, the endnotes. And so what I'll do is I will read the paragraph and then we'll read the endnotes, some of the notes that they talk about. Okay? So that's what this intro will be about. And as I said, my book is kind of falling apart a little bit. Okay, let's get started. This is very exciting. I feel like we're almost stepping into a theater, like a Shakespeare theater, if you will. And we're just going to jump right in and go for it. So, this is the cast of main characters in this book. And let's go through it. It looks like it's in alphabetical order. Okay, Ackerman, Robert A. Washington lawyer, explained how ex-CIA officials tried to regain control of black gold accounts in New York banks. Anderson, Robert B. toured treasure sites with MacArthur, set up Black Eagle Trust with Japanese war loot, member of Eisenhower cabinet. Angleton, James Jesus, top CIA official, used Nazi and Japanese war loot to rig post-war elections in Italy and Greece. Asaka Yasuhiko, that's the Japanese prince, commanded rape and looting of Nanking. Barragan, General Santiago. His memos to Marcos describe secret talks with top Japanese officials for joint recovery of war loot in Manila. Belly, Melvin, San Francisco lawyer, sued Citibank for disappropriating war gold from Santa Romana accounts. Bush, George H.W. President, wrote personal note to head of Japan's LDP that enabled Alexander Haig to negotiate a $1 billion IOU. Cannon, Colonel Jack, used war gold to finance death squads in occupied Japan to eliminate leftist and labor organizers. Casey William, CIA director. Casey William, CIA director, involved with Lansdale gold recoveries and Black Eagle Trust, later removed Marcos from power. Cathcart, Daniel, California lawyer whose successful suit against Marcos for theft of the gold Buddha won a $43 billion judgment. Uh, I'm sorry. So for a side note, just for those who are just listening, who are not watching the camera, these cast of characters are listed in alphabetical order according to their last name first, comma, and first name. So that's why I was reading it kind of funny. Sorry about that. I should have said that in the beginning. Okay, continue. Chichibu, prince, brother of Emperor Hirohito, headed Golden Lily campaign to loot all of East and Southeast Asia, then hid the treasure. Klein, Ray, CIA deputy director, used Japanese war loot to manipulate foreign governments, fought for control of Santa Romana gold at Citibank. Curtis, Robert, mining expert brought in by Marcos to launder gold, engineered major recoveries, photographed 173 original Golden Lily maps. Doihara, general, Japan's senior secret agent, one of 5 top men in Golden Lily, masterminded the looting of Manchuria and China. Dulles, Allen, CIA director, brother of J.F. Dulles, oversaw the Black Eagle Trust. And setting up scores of slush funds around the world. Dulles, John Foster, ARC conservative Secretary of State, contrived false 1951 peace treaty to shield Japan's elite from reparations. Foreigner, Allen, CIA agent in Nippon Star and Phoenix Exploration, explained how war gold would finance private American Gestapo. Hirohito, emperor, received and never returned the finest cultural treasures stolen from 12 companies, kept secret Swiss gold accounts. Johnson, Olaf, Swedish psychic, brought in by Marcos to pinpoint treasure vaults and sunken ships, saw warehouses filled with stolen gold. Kishi Nobusuke, prime minister, headed looting of Manchuria, served in Tojo's war cabinet. Nixon gave him control of the M Fund. Kodama Hoshio, Japan's top gangster, aided Golden Lily by looting China's underworld, used proceeds to set up Japan's ruling LDP. Kojima Kashi, chauffeur of General Yamashita, tortured by Lansdale and Santa Romana to reveal a dozen vaults where treasure was hidden. Lansdale, Edward G., became America's most famous Cold War warrior thanks to torture of Kojima and recovery of Japanese gold. Lossier, Edmund C., banking expert whose file of Japanese documents proved that notorious, quote, 57 debt instruments were not forgeries. MacArthur, General Douglas, used war loot to create a trust fund for Hirohito at Sanwa Bank, also set up the secret M Fund to back the LDP. Marcos Imelda, former Philippine First Lady, accused of hiding gold in banks around the world, bribed witnesses to lie about gold Buddha. Marcos Ferdinand, Philippine Philippine dictator, recovered Japanese treasure in the 1970s, shared the gold with CIA and White House until his downfall. McCloy, John J., original planner of Global Black Eagle Trust, based on Nazi and Japanese war loot, became head of the World Bank. McMicking, Joseph, MacArthur protege who presided over torture of Major Kojima, used some of the war gold to become a global financier. Miyazawa Kichi, finance minister and one of three Japanese who negotiated rigged 1951 peace treaty, still chief controller of the M Fund. Rosas, Roger, found solid gold Buddha looted from Burma after President Marcos stole it. Rosas was tortured and murdered to silence him. Santa Romana, Severino, tortured Yamashita's driver, recovered 12 treasure vaults, became CIA gatekeeper of the Black Eagle Trust. Sorry, I butchered that name, Norbert, former deputy U.S. Attorney General, falsely convicted for trying to negotiate a, quote, 57 IOU, ruined financially and professionally. Schweitzer, General Robert, advisor to President Reagan, begged Robert Curtis to help White House recover more war loot. Singlaub, General John, Schweitzer's partner in gold recoveries. He spent millions in the Philippines digging holes in the wrong places. Takeda Tsuneyoshi, Prince, cousin of Hirohito, grandson of Meiji, took charge of hiding war treasure at 175 volts in the Philippines. Valmores, Ben, Philippine rice farmer. As a boy, he was valet to Prince Takeda. Visiting all 175 treasure vaults, was given a copy of Takeda's maps. Whitney, General Courtney, MacArthur's lawyer and intelligence chief, set up M Fund to influence Japanese elections with massive bribes. Willoughby, General Charles, MacArthur's G2 chief, paid war criminals to rewrite history and manipulate Japan's government. Yamashita, General Tomoyuki, Japan's top general, conqueror of Singapore, wrongly linked to plunder by the misnomer Yamashita's gold. Wow, it's very interesting. Okay, so let's do the author's note. And I'm going to move the camera in just a little bit more. Yeah, that's better. Okay, author's note. Slaying the Messenger. Many people told us this book was historically important and must be published, then warned us that if it were published, we would be murdered. An Australian economist who read it said, "I hope they let you live." He did not have to explain who they were. Okay, hold on a second here for a minute. Just going to take a drink of water before I begin. I don't know how long this prologue or intro is going to be, so all right. Japan's looting of Asia and the hiding of this war gold in American banks is closely linked to the issue of Holocaust gold hidden in Swiss banks. Revealing the secrets of either is a dangerous business. Jean Ziegler, a Swiss professor and parliamentarian, did much to expose 5 decades of official amnesia in his book, The Swiss, the Gold, and the Dead. After publishing it and testifying in 1998 before the U.S. Senate Banking Committee about Jewish assets in Swiss banks, he was charged with treason by Swiss federal prosecutor Carla Del Ponte. The charge was brought by 21 financiers, commercial bankers, and politicians of the far right, many of them major stockholders in large Swiss banks. They accused Ziegler of being an accomplice of Jewish organizations who extorted vast sums of money from Switzerland. Ziegler is only one of many who have been persecuted for putting ethics before greed. Christopher Maley, a Union Bank Swiss UBS security guard, was threatened with murder and the kidnapping of his wife and children after he testified before a U.S. Senate committee about documents he rescued from UBS shredders. He and his family were given asylum in America. We have been threatened with murder before. When we published the Sung Dynasty, we were warned by a senior CIA official that a hit team was being assembled in Taiwan to come murder us. He said, quote, I would take this very seriously if I were you. We vanished for a year to an island off the coast of British Columbia. While we were gone, a Taiwan hit team arrived in San Francisco and shot dead the Chinese American journalist, Henry Liu. When we published the Marcos Dynasty, we expected trouble from the Marcos family and its cronies, but instead we were harassed by Washington. Others had investigated Marcos, but we were the first to show how the US government was secretly involved with Marcos gold deals. We came under attack from the US Treasury Department and the Internal Revenue Service, whose agents made threatening midnight phone calls to our elderly parents. Arriving in New York for an author tour, one of us was intercepted at JFK Airport, passport seized, and held incommunicado for 3 hours. Eventually, the passport was returned without a word of explanation. When we ran Freedom of Information queries to see what was behind it, we were grudgingly sent a copy of a telex message on which every word was blacked out, including the date. The justification given for this censorship was the need to protect government sources, which are above the law. During one harassing phone call from a U.S. Treasury agent, he said he was sitting in his office watching an interview we had done for a Japanese TV net. Let's try that again. During one harassing phone call from a U.S. Treasury agent, he said he was sitting in his office watching an interview he had done for a Japanese TV network, an interview broadcast only in Japanese, which we had never seen. After publishing the Yamato Dynasty, which briefly mentioned the discovery that is the basis for gold warriors, our phones and emails were tapped. We know this because when one of us was in a European clinic briefly for a medical procedure, the head nurse reported that, quote, someone posing as your American doctor had been on the phone asking questions. When a brief extract of this book was published in the South China Morning Post in August 2001, several phone calls from the editors were cut off suddenly. Emails from the newspaper took 72 hours to reach us, while copies sent to an associate nearby arrived instantly. In recent months, we began to receive veiled death threats. What have we done to provoke murder? To borrow a phrase from Gene Ziegler, we are, quote, combating official amnesia. We live in dangerous times, like Germany in the 1930s, when anyone who makes inconvenient disclosures about hidden assets can be branded a terrorist or a traitor. A few months ago, 3 ex-ambassadors to Japan declared that former American POWs and civilian slave laborers suing giant Japanese corporations for compensation were tantamount to terrorists. Now, a CIA official says that leaks of classified information must be stopped, even if it is necessary to, quote, send SWAT teams into journalists' homes, end quote. Everybody's national security is a serious matter. We have no argument with that, but national security can be invoked to hide official corruption and conflict of interest. It's called tyranny. The only cure is openness and sunlight. In this book, we do not question whether President Truman did the right thing in keeping these war gold recoveries secret. That is for others to debate. What we point out is that total secrecy enabled corrupt people to abuse the resulting slush funds, and these abuses have multiplied like a cancer ever since. The global network of corruption has grown around the slush funds. Bureaucrats, politicians, spooks, and generals have become addicted to black money. There are indications that a lot of this war gold has been siphoned off by America's far right under the guise of patriotism. The unintended consequences of Truman's decision have become a poisonous part of the world financial system, putting innocent people at hazard. Those people and institutions benefiting from this corruption will do everything possible to hide it, including murder. The only way to get rid of an illness is to first recognize what it is. But when the emperor goes crazy from syphilis of the brain, the first person to be tortured and burned at the stake is the doctor who made the diagnosis, slaying the messenger. Despite the best efforts of the American and Japanese governments to destroy, withhold, or lose documentation related to Golden Lily, we have accumulated thousands of documents, conducted thousands of hours of interviews, and we make all of these available to readers of this book on two compact discs, available from our website, www.bowstring.net, so they can make up their own minds. We encourage others with knowledge of these events to come forward. When the top is corrupt, the truth will not come from the top. It will emerge in bits and pieces from people like Gene Ziegler and Christopher Mele, who decided they had to do something. As a precaution, should anything odd documentation. Hmm. Okay, sorry about that. This is very interesting. I've never had this happen before. Okay. Little technical difficulty there. Um, okay. Well, I hope I'm recording. I don't know if I'm recording or not. It says there's something not right with my microphone. But we will see. If not, I'll have to do it again. Okay, as a precaution, should anything odd happen, we have arranged for this book and all its documentation to be put up on the internet at a number of sites. If we are murdered, readers will have no difficulty figuring out who they are. Okay, so let's read the annotations in the back about the author's note. Let me see if I can find it here. Okay. Okay, annotations. The purpose of this book is to reveal why so little is known about Japan's industrial scale looting of Asia and the devious role Washington played in the cover-up that continues to this day. Many people may be shocked and dismayed by our revelations or think them fantastic. Starting with the eyewitness account of the live burial of Japanese engineers who were responsible for creating treasure vaults in the Philippines, readers will want to see the proof. Those who have read our previous books know they are thoroughly documented with up to 200 pages of annotations and will recognize continuing themes we have investigated over 30 years. Like the bones of dinosaurs or the fragments of the Space Shuttle Challenger, the evidence is widely scattered but abundant. In putting together these bits and pieces of historical debris, a thoroughly convincing body of evidence has emerged. The detailed annotations that follow are backed up with another 1,500 megabytes of documentation on our 3 CDs, which readers are welcome to examine. So these are the notes for author's note. So the note on Gene Ziegler's indictment for treason, for for revealing secrets about the Swiss government and Holocaust gold. C. Ziegler, The Swiss, the Gold, and the Dead, page 280 and 281. Here's a note about Henry Liu. Henry Liu's murder was the subject of a book by David Kaplan, See Fires of the Dragon. And here's a note about James Bruce. It is CIA's James Bruce, chairman of the Foreign Denial and Deception Committee. Interesting. Foreign Denial and Deception Committee. Wow. There is a committee for that. That's just incredible. Okay, it is James Bruce who wants to send SWAT teams into journalists' homes. See Village Voice Online, July 31st, July 31. Oh, okay, July 31 to August 6th. I think that's what it means, 2002. So those are some of the other books if you guys are interested to do a further deep dive, right? Those are two books here that you can read. Okay, let's continue. Here are some quotes. Money is the sinew of wars. Quote by Cicero. The first casualty when war comes is truth. Here's a quote from Senator Hiram Johnson. That was from Senator Hiram Johnson, 1918. And the last quote, the study of money above all other fields in economics is one in which complexity is used to disguise truth or to evade truth, not to reveal it. That quote was from John Kenneth Galbraith. Okay, here's the prologue. Buried alive. Okay, just going to take a drink of my water. All right. In the closing months of World War II in the Philippines, while General Yamashita Tomoyuki fought a delaying action in the rugged mountains of Luzon, several of Japan's highest-ranking imperial princes were preparing for the future. They were busy hiding tons of looted gold bullion and other stolen treasure in nearby caves and tunnels to be recovered later. This was the property of 12 Asian countries accumulated over thousands of years. Expert teams accompanying Japan's armed forces had systematically emptied treasures, banks, factories, private homes, pawn shops, art galleries, and stripped ordinary people, while Japan's top gangsters looted Asia's underworld and black economy. In this, the Japanese were far more thorough than the Nazis. It was as if a giant vacuum cleaner passed across East and Southeast Asia. Much of the plunder reached Japan overland through Korea. The rest, moving by sea, got no farther than the Philippines as the U.S. submarine blockade became complete in early 1943. Hiding the treasure there was crucial so that if Japan lost the war militarily, it would not lose financially. In whatever settlement concluded the war, Japan always expected to keep the Philippines. Overseen by the princess, 175 imperial treasure vaults were constructed throughout the islands. Early in June 1945, when when U.S. tanks were less than 20 miles from Bambang, the 175 chief engineers, of whose vaults were given a farewell party 220 feet underground, is a complex known as Tunnel 8, stacked wall to wall with row after row of gold bars. As the evening progressed, they drank great quantities of sake, sang patriotic songs, and shouted "Banzai, long life" over and over. At midnight, General Yamashita and the princess slipped out, and the dynamite charges were set off in the access tunnels, entombing the engineers. They were buried alive. Those who did not kill themselves ritually would gradually suffocate, surrounded by gold bars. The vaults would remain secret. In subsequent days, the princes escaped to Japan by submarine, and 3 months later, General Yamashita surrendered to American troops. For half a century, this grisly live burial remained unknown. The hidden treasure was brushed off as, quote, the legend of Yamashita's gold. But an eyewitness to the entombment has taken us to Tunnel 8 and given us his personal account. During the war, Ben Valmores was the young Filipino valet of an exceptional Japanese prince who was in charge of building, inventorying, and sealing all imperial treasure sites in the Philippines. Highly educated and sometimes sentimental, the prince spared Ben's life at the last moment and let him out of Tunnel 8 just before the dynamite was detonated. Ben, in poor health in his mid 70s, when we interviewed him, told us over many months what he saw and experienced in the company of his prince from 1945 to 1943 to 1945. That's a 3 year span. He provided us with essential clues that eventually enabled us to identify his prince and most of the other princes involved. Japan's looting of Asia was overseen by Emperor Hirohito's charming and cultivated brother, Prince Chichibu. His organization was codenamed Kin no Yuri, Golden Lily, the title of one of the emperor's poems. Lesser princes headed different branches of Golden Lily across the conquered territories. Japanese sources now have confirmed that Ben's wartime master was Prince Takeda Tsunuyoshi, first cousin of Emperor Hirohito and the grandson of Emperor Meiji. To corroborate this, in 1998, we gave Ben a blind test with obscure 1930s photographs of many princes, photos that we obtained from the British Library Oriental Collection. These were photos of the princes in army uniforms as they looked on the eve of Pearl Harbor. Although we removed the names from each photo and mingled photographs of ordinary soldiers, Ben instantly identified Prince Takeda. Hirohito's two brothers, Prince Chichibu and Prince Mikasa, and the elder Prince Asaka, who had commanded Japanese armies at the rape of Nanking. Ben said he had spent time with each of them, bringing them food, tea, and cigarettes while they inventoried and closed treasure sites. Ben Valmores was a rural rice farmer who never left the Philippines and never went beyond grade school, so his instant correct identification of the princes was persuasive. When he came upon our photo of Prince Takeda, Ben froze, then began crooning the Japanese folk song, Sakura, Sakura, Cherry Blossoms, which he said Takeda often sang to himself. The discovery of Prince Takeda's identity provided us with a piece missing from a much larger puzzle. While we were writing a biography of Japan's imperial family, the Yamato dynasty, we were told that in October 1945, American intelligence agents learned the location of some Japanese treasure vaults in the Philippines, and we secretly recovered billions of dollars worth of gold, platinum, cultural artifacts, and loose gems. This information, if true, revealed the existence of an extraordinary state secret that the US government had kept hidden for over half a century. So serious were the implications that we decided they merited separate investigation. Here is some of what we have learned. On September 2nd, 1945, after receiving official notice of Japan's surrender, General Yamashita and his staff emerged from their mountain stronghold in the Kyengan Pocket and presented their swords to a group of U.S. Army officers led by Military Police Major A.S. Jack Kenworthy, who took them to New Bilibad prison outside Manila. Because of gruesome atrocities committed earlier by Admiral Iwabuchi Kanji's sailors and Marines in the city of Manila, after Yamashita had ordered them to leave the city unharmed, the general was charged with war crimes. During his trial, there was no mention of war loot, but there was a hidden agenda. Let me see here. I think I will read. Okay, let me read one more page and then I'll read the annotations in the back. Because it was not possible to torture Yamashita physically without his becoming evident to his defense attorneys, members of his staff were tortured instead. His driver, Major Kojima Kashi, was given special attention. Since Yamashita had arrived from Manchuria in October 1944 to take over the defense of the Philippines, Kojima had driven him everywhere. In charge of Kojima's torture was a Filipino-American intelligence officer named Severino Garcia Diaz Santa Romana, a man of many names and personalities, whose friends called him Santi. He wanted Major Kojima to reveal each place to which he had taken Yamashita, where bullion and other treasure were hidden. Supervising Santi, we learned, was Captain Edward G. Lansdale, later one of America's best-known gold Cold, cold warriors. In September 1945, Lansdale was 37 years old and was utterly insignificant. Only an advertising agency copywriter who had spent the war in San Francisco writing propaganda for the OSS. In September 1945, chance entered Landau's life in a big way when President Truman ordered the OSS to close down. To preserve Americans' intelligence assets and his own personal network, OSS Chief General William Donovan moved personnel to other government or military posts. Captain Lansdale was one of 50 office staff given a chance to transfer to U.S. Army G2 in the Philippines. There, Lansdale heard about Santee torturing General Yamashita's driver and joined the torture sessions as an observer and participant. Early that October, Major Kojima broke down and led Lansdale and Santee to more than a dozen Golden Lily treasure vaults in the mountains north of Manila, including two that were easily opened. What lay inside astounded everyone. While Santee and his teams set to opening the rest of these vaults, Captain Lansdale flew to Tokyo to brief General MacArthur, then on to Washington to brief President Truman. After discussions with his cabinet, Truman decided to proceed with the recovery, but to keep it a state secret. The treasure, gold, platinum, and barrels of loose gems, was combined with excess loot recovered in Europe to create a worldwide covert political action fund to fight communism. This black gold gave the Truman administration access to virtually limitless unvouchered funds for covert operations. It also provided an asset base that was used by Washington to reinforce the treasures of its allies, to bribe political leaders, and to manipulate elections in foreign countries. In the late 1940s, this agenda was seen as entirely justified because the Soviet Union was aggressively supporting communist and socialist movements all over the world, putting the survival of the capitalist world in peril. Most readers will be as surprised as we were by this information. Some may be deeply troubled by Truman's strategic decision, which others may heartily endorse. It is not within the scope of this book to examine that decision or to explore whether it was right or wrong. It might have been a wise decision at the time, which had tragic consequences in the longer term. Ours is only a preliminary report. In what follows, we try to remain politically neutral. The only purpose of this book is to lift the veil of secrecy and to bring forward and examine the unforeseen consequences, which are many and troubling. Okay, so let's read the annotations in the back here about that few pages, couple of pages. And okay. All right, so here's the prologue. Prologue, because it is a summary, limited citations are given for the prologue. For individual chapters, readers will find full and exhaustive annotations for all statements, quotes, and statistics. Readers who want more detail and full reproductions of documents may obtain from our website, excuse me, I just burped. May obtain from our website, www.bowstring.net, the two compact discs we have prepared containing over 900 megabytes of additional documentation. So here's a note about Yamashita's holding action. Yamashita's holding action. By May 5th, 1945, U.S. forces were advancing into the mountains so quickly that Yamashita had to write off Bontoc and Bagwal, sorry, butchered that name, two corners of his defensive triangle. He began pulling his forces back between Bambang and Bagabag to funnel them along the Asin River into the Kiangan pocket. Between 1 and 4 of June, Yamashita's anti-tank units south of Aritao fought a running battle with the U.S. 775th Tank Battalion, and pressure became acute to speed up withdrawal from Bang Bang, Bam Bang, into the pocket. It was at this point that entombment of the engineers occurred. See Chapter 6. And here's a note on Ben Van Morris, which was the rice grower, or I guess, or the valet, I think it was. Ben Van Morris was interviewed by us extensively. See chapters 6 and 12, both text and endnotes for more detail. Evidence has emerged that the Japanese High Command routinely authorized live burials and exterminations of Allied POWs starting in August 1944. POWs, prisoners of war. Orders such as the following were passed down from the Ministry of War in Tokyo to regional commands throughout Japanese occupied Asia. Quote, whether they are destroyed individually or in groups, or however it is done with mass bombing, poisonous smoke, poison, drowning, decapitation, or whatever, dispose of the prisoners of war as the situation dictates. In any case, it is the aim to annihilate them all and to leave no trace, end quote. Thousands of prisoners were mass murdered by Japanese soldiers following these orders. For example, on July 30th, 1945, the same month as the live burial witnessed by Ben Van Morris, a similar event took place at mining works at Loakulu in Borneo. 100 Dutch POWs, along with their wives and children, were murdered on orders of the camp commandant, obeying instructions from Tokyo. The wives and mothers were the first to die while their helpless husbands and terrified children watched. Hands tied behind their backs, the women were individually hacked to death. Oh my gosh. I hope there's no kids listening to this. Oh. Um, with swords and bayonets, and their bodies hurled down the 600-foot mine shaft. The screaming children were tossed alive into the pit. Finally, the men were decapitated, their heads and bodies dumped on top of the corpses of their wives and children. Wow, that is so brutal. It's so sad that humans can do that to each other. 3 days later, at Mitsubishi Sado Island gold mine, off the west coast of Japan, 387 Allied POWs were entombed alive in the tunnels. The Japanese soldiers herded their prisoners into the mine shaft laterals at a depth of 400 feet, then detonated explosives that sequentially collapsed the tunnels at depths of 300 feet, 200 feet, and 100 feet. Not one POW made it out alive. This information and the sworn testimony of one of the Japanese officers who directed the mass murder at Sado Island was then suppressed by U.S. occupation authorities as part of their campaign to shield bankers, financiers, and corporate leaders in Japan and Germany, including the management of Mitsubishi. Okay, so here are some footnotes on Yamashita surrender. You could see chapter 7 for that. Kojima Kashi, you could see a footnote for that in chapter 7, or I guess a more extended explanation maybe. Here's a footnote on Lansdale. See chapters 7, 8, 10, 13, and 15. Wow. Okay. All right, continue. It was not Truman's decision alone. The idea for a global political action fund based on war loot actually originated during the Roosevelt administration with Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson. During the war, Stimson had a brain trust thinking hard about Axis plunder and how it should be handled when peace came. As the tide turned against the Axis, it was only a matter of time before treasure began to be recovered. Much of this war prize was in the form of gold looted by the Nazis from conquered countries and civilian victims. To eliminate any trace of original ownership, The Nazis had melted it down and recast it as ingots, hallmarked with the swastika and black eagle of the Reichsbank. There were other reasons why the gold was difficult to trace. Many of the original owners had died, and pre war governments had ceased to exist. Eastern Europe was falling under the control of the Soviet Union, so returning gold looted there was out of the question. Stimson's special assistants on this topic were his deputies, John J. McCloy and Robert Levitt, and consultant Robert B. Anderson, all clever men with outstanding careers in public service and banking. McCloy later became head of the World Bank, Levitt, Secretary of Defense, Anderson, Secretary of the Treasury. Their solution was to set up what is informally called the Black Eagle Trust. The idea was first discussed with America's allies in secret during July 1944 when 44 nations met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to plan a post-war world economy. This was confirmed in documents we obtained by a number of high-level sources, including a CIA officer based in Manila and former CIA Deputy Director Ray Klein, who knew of Santi's recoveries in 1945. As recently as the 1990s, Klein continued to be involved in attempts to control Japanese war gold still in the vaults of Citibank. After briefing President Truman and others in Washington, including McCloy, Levitt, and Stimson, Captain Lansdale returned to Tokyo in November 1945 with Robert B. Anderson. General MacArthur then accompanied Anderson and Lansdale on a covert flight to Manila, where they set out for a tour of the vaults Santi already had opened. In them, we were told, Anderson and MacArthur strolled down, quote, row after row of gold bars stacked 2 meters tall, end quote. From what they saw, it was evident that over a period of years, Japan had looted many billions of dollars in treasure from all over Asia. What was seen by Anderson and MacArthur was only the gold that had not reached Japan. Far from being bankrupted by the war, Japan had been greatly enriched. According to Ray Klein and others, between 1945 and 1947, the gold bullion recovered by Santi and Lansdale was discreetly moved by ship to 176 accounts at banks in 42 countries. Secrecy was vital. If the recovery of a huge mass of stolen gold became known, thousands of people would come forward to claim it, many of them fraudulently, and governments would be bogged down resolving ownership. Truman also was told that the very existence of so much black gold, if it became public knowledge, would cause the fixed price of $35 an ounce to collapse. So many countries had linked their currencies to the US dollars and the dollar linked to gold that currency values throughout the world would plummet, causing financial disaster. This argument may have been greatly exaggerated by those who stood to benefit from the black ego strategy, but nobody could be certain what the consequences would be. If the gold was kept secret, prices could be kept at $35 an ounce. The dollar would remain strong, and currencies pegged to gold would be stable. Meanwhile, the black gold would serve as a reserve asset, bolstering the prime banks of allied countries, strengthening the governments of those nations. As a safeguard, the bullion placed in those banks was carefully controlled. Strict limits were placed on the use that could be made of the gold, a process called earmarking. This enabled Washington to bring pressure from time to time on those governments, central banks, and prime banks. Put simply, as long as a country and its leaders cooperated and remained allied to the United States in the Cold War, derivatives of the sleeping bullion could be used for patronage through political slush funds. Documents do show that between 1945 and 1947, very large quantities of gold and platinum were deposited into the world's biggest banks, including Union Bank, Swiss, and other Swiss banks, which became major repositories of the Black Eagle Trust. Swiss banks played a pivotal role because Switzerland had remained neutral during the war, and its banks had not been looted, damaged, or depleted. Documents signed by senior Swiss banking officials show that very large loans backed by this asset base were then extended to the British government, the Egyptian government, the Chinese nationalist regime, and other governments struggling to recover from the war. What went wrong in the longer term is that the cloak of national security created a situation ripe for abuse. What protects national secrets also protects government officials and their collaborators in the private sector. In later chapters, we see numerous documented instances when these underground funds surfaced as huge bribes or were used to buy elections in Italy, Greece, Japan, and elsewhere. Beneficial trusts were set up in behalf of influential people throughout the world. Gold bearer certificates were given as inducements. In the hands of clever men, the possibilities were endless. Over a period of decades, some of the world's biggest banks became addicted to playing with the black gold in their vaults. Now they will do whatever is necessary to keep the gold, even if it means defrauding account holders or their heirs, as happened with Holocaust gold in Swiss banks. In retrospect, recovering Golden Lily treasure vaults and setting up the Black Eagle Trust were the easy parts, done for patriotic reasons and a noble cause. Making intelligent use of so much underground money during the Cold War was not so easy, when national security made peer review impossible. Who is to supervise clandestine funds except those who benefit by using them? There are other abuses as well. To hide the existence of this treasure and to secure America's position against the tide of communism sweeping across Asia in the late 1940s, Washington told a number of major diplomatic lies, especially lies about Japan, which had stolen most of the gold. Japan's ruling elite were traditional hardcore conservatives, greatly alarmed by communism. America wanted Japan to be its anti-communist bastion in Asia, so the source of Tokyo's hidden wealth must never be acknowledged. The most ardent anti-communists in Tokyo happened to be indicted war criminals. So while America introduced democratic reforms and a new constitution, it put Japan back under the control of men who were devoutly undemocratic and kept them in power with huge infusions of black money. Washington insisted, starting in 1945, that Japan never stole anything and was flat broke and bankrupt when the war ended. Here was the beginning of many great distortions, which would become terrible secrets. Because the treasure amassed by Golden Lily and recovered by Washington had to be kept secret, citizens of Japan and America were grossly deceived. In 1951, peace treaty with Japan was skewed by these deceits, so thousands of POWs and civilians who were forced to perform slave labor for Japanese corporations received no compensation for their suffering. To shield Japan from demands for war reparations, John Foster Dulles met privately with 3 Japanese to work out the treaty terms in secret. One of the 3, Miyazawa Kichi, later served as Japan's prime minister and repeatedly as its minister of finance. According to Article 14 of the treaty, quote, it is recognized that Japan should pay reparations to the Allied powers for the damage and suffering caused by it during the war. Nevertheless, it is also recognized that the resources of Japan are not presently sufficient, end quote. To enforce the claim that Japan was broke, Article 14 stated, quote, the Allied powers waive all reparations claims of the Allied powers and their nationals arising out of any actions taken by Japan, end quote. Our italics, authors italics, and they italicized and their nationals. Allied powers and their nationals, right? By signing the treaty, Allied countries concurred that Japan's plunder had vanished down a rabbit hole. and all Japan's victims were out of luck. In return for going along with the treaty, we documented that Washington sent secret shipments of black gold recovered by Santa Romana to beef up the Allies' exhausted central banks. Because of the Black Eagle Trust and the political action funds it spawned remained off the books, some of these slush funds fell into the wrong hands, where they remain to this day bigger than ever. According to reliable sources in Washington and Tokyo, in 1960, Vice President Nixon gave one of the biggest of these funds, the M Fund, to the leaders of Japan's Liberal Democratic Party in return for the promise of kickbacks to Nixon's campaign for the American presidency. This in itself is deeply disturbing. But the M Fund, then worth $35 billion and now said to be worth upwards of $500 billion, has been controlled ever since by LDP kingmakers who use it to buy elections, to keep Japan a one-party dictatorship, and to block any meaningful reforms. Similar abuses with other secret funds are to be found all over the world. Secrecy is power. Power corrupts. Secret power corrupts secretly. As Japan expert Chalmers Johnson nicely put it, quote, the Cold War is over. Whatever the United States may have believed was necessary to prosecute the Cold War itself can no longer be used to justify ignorance about its costs and unintended consequences. The issue today is not whether Japan might veer towards socialism or neutralism, but why the government that evolved from its long period of dependence on the United States is so corrupt, inept, and weak, end quote. Okay, let's read the annotations in the back for this section here. Let's see here. Okay, so here's a footnote about Stimson, or annotation about Stimson, a note about Stimson. Stimson had resigned his wartime post by this date, but still was actively involved. The Black Eagle Trust is covered in chapters 7, 8, and 9. And here's a note about MacArthur going to Philippines. There is no public record of MacArthur making his flight to the Philippines, but we have confirmed it with numerous sources who said MacArthur was in Luzon with Anderson during that period. It would have been a simple matter for MacArthur to make the flight secretly from Atsugi Air Base in Japan to Clark Air Base near Manila. See Chapter 7. Here's a note about Santa Romana. Santa Romana, his role in the gold recoveries and what happened to this treasure. See Chapters 7, 10, 13, and 15. And here are two notes about Nixon and Japan's looting of Asia. So Nixon and the M Fund, you could see chapters 9 and 15. And then Japan's looting of Asia is the subject of chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, interesting, eh? All right, continuing. Oh, thank you for sticking with us so far. I know this is a long intro, but it's a fascinating story, don't you think? Put your thoughts in the comment below. I'd be interested to see what you guys think. Okay, continuing. Where did all this treasure come from? Until now, Japan's looting of Asia has been brushed off as a few random acts of theft and violence committed by drunken soldiers. This is disinformation. Looting as an extension of war is nothing new. In 1860, British and French armies on a punitive expedition to North China got drunk, ran wild, and looted the magnificent summer palace outside Peking, smashing, breaking, or burning everything they could not carry. and finished by torturing all but one of the palaces and pavilions. Unable to believe the gold they found was real, these uneducated soldiers threw most of it away or traded it for alcohol. The commander of this joint force was Lord Elgin, or Elgin. I don't know how to pronounce that. Sorry about that. Whose father had removed most of the sculpture from the Pantheon in Athens. In 1900, Western armies began marched. In 1900, Western armies again marched into Peking. This time, excuse me, to lift the so-called Boxer Siege of the legations. Legations? Then went on a drunken rampage, looting and smashing treasures inside the Forbidden City. What Japan did between 1895 and 1945 was qualitatively different. This was not drunken looting and smashing. The Japanese were serious, sober, and deliberate, giving special attention to the theft of valuable books and manuscripts that would have been ignored by common thieves or foot soldiers. They devoted special attention to looting the Asian underworld. Triads, sex, racketeers. Japan also flooded China with narcotics, giving gangsters drugs in exchange for gold, which brought treasure out of every hiding place. On a personal level, extortion was used to terrorize wealthy individuals, including tycoons, clan elders, bankers, and businessmen. Among the most valuable articles taken back to Japan were artworks and historic artifacts. It is a matter of record that to this day, only a tiny bit of this patrimony has been returned to the countries or individuals from whom it was stolen. Some major artifacts, including solid gold Buddhas, have been seen recently in underground hiding places in the Philippines, but most of the art and artifacts are still in private vaults in Japan or in the imperial collections in Tokyo. Why was Japan allowed to keep it? Officially, we were told that Japan's wartime elite, the imperial family, the Zaibatsu, the Yakuza, and the good bureaucrats, ended the war as impoverished victims of a handful of bad military zealots. As readers will see, this is not true. Many of Japan's elite, including Emperor Hirohito, ended the war far richer than when it began, and some made billions just before and after the surrender. We were told that Japan was badly damaged and barely able to feed itself at war's end. In fact, surprisingly few factories and mansions were destroyed or even seriously damaged, and there was little damage to infrastructure. Most of the damage that has been so widely publicized was to the matchbox homes of millions of ordinary Japanese, whose suffering did not count in the view of their own overlords. Obsessed by the urgent need to make Japan a bulwark against communism, Washington excused its wartime leaders, imperial family, and financial elite from any responsibility for the destruction and destitution of 12 Asian countries. Only a handful of Japan's wartime leaders were executed as scapegoats. Several were coerced or framed into taking the blame for the rest of the leadership. At the end of the post-war occupation, all Japan's indicted war criminals were set free, including gangsters and godfathers who had directed the world's largest drug trafficking system across East Asia during the 1930s and 1940s. Washington saw to it that Japan's government was put back in the hands of the same men who had started the war. This was equivalent to reinstating the Nazi Party in post-war Berlin. There was little protest in Japan because all opposition was silenced by a campaign of witch hunting far more severe than the McCarthy witch hunts in America. As we demonstrate, the rebirth of Japan's far right was financed with war loot and corporate profits wrung out of Asia during the war by Japan's Zaibatsu. It is an inescapable fact that from the beginning, the U.S. occupation, General MacArthur, President Truman, John Foster Dulles, and a handful of others knew all about the plunder and the continuing extraordinary wealth of the Japanese elite. In an official report on the occupation prepared by MacArthur's headquarters and published in 1950, there is a startling admission. Quote, one of the spectacular tasks of the occupation dealt with collecting and putting under guard the great hoards of gold, silver, precious stones, foreign postage stamps, engraving plates, and all currency not legal in Japan. Even though the bulk of this wealth was collected and placed under United States military custody by Japanese officials, undeclared catches of these treasures were known to exist. End quote. MacArthur's staff knew, for example, of $2 billion in gold bullion that had been sunk in Tokyo Bay, later recovered. Another great fortune discovered by U.S. intelligence services in 1946 was $13 billion in war loot amassed by underworld godfather Kodama Yoshio, who, as a rear admiral in the Imperial Navy working with the Golden Lily in China and Southeast Asia, was in charge of plundering the Asian underworld and racketeers. He was also in charge of Japan's wartime drug trade throughout Asia. After the war, to get out of Sugamo prison and avoid persecution of war crimes, Kodama gave $100 million to the CIA, which was added to the M Fund's coffers. Kodama then personally financed the creation of the two political parties that emerged into Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, strongly backed to this day by Washington. Hard evidence of Santi's secret recovery of Japanese war gold comes from straightforward legal actions in America. Such simple things at the probating of his will, the verification of his tax records in the state of New York in Albany, and legal evidence of his fortune deposited in the United States, Switzerland, Hong Kong, and elsewhere provide hard evidence that the world is awash with clandestine bank accounts growing out of Golden Lily. As we shall see, when Santa Romana died in 1974, some of his biggest black gold accounts were quickly transferred to the name of Major General Edward G. Lansdale, the man who participated with Santi in the torture of Major Kojima 30 years earlier in 1945. By 1974, Lansdale had been retired from the CIA for over a decade, raising puzzling questions that are only answered by recognizing the role of Lansdale and other former spooks and generals in America's new network of private, military, and intelligence firms. There are many other famous names tied to this curious story. Longtime Citibank CEO John Reed was named in some of these lawsuits as a key figure in the movement of Santa Romana black gold. Among those instrumental in the lawsuits was San Francisco attorney Melvin Belli. Writing to the editor of the Las Vegas Sun, Belli said, quote, I'm now convinced that some very important banks around the world did have deposits of money for Santa Romana, end quote. Belli's suit read in part, quote, Defendant John Reed, the chairman and chief executive officer of Defendant Citibank, has spearheaded Citibank's conversion of the gold bullion which was owned by Santa Romana. Reed and Citibank have systematically sold and are selling said gold bullions to buyers and converting the sales proceeds to their own use, end quote. Other lawsuits prove that Golden Lily war loot was indeed hidden in the Philippines. Rogelio Rosas, a Filipino locksmith, found a 1-ton solid gold Buddha and thousands of small gold bars hidden in a tunnel behind a hospital in the mountain resort of Baguio. which has served as a headquarters for General Yamashita. The moment he heard what Rosas had found, President Marcos sent thugs to confiscate the gold Buddha. When Rosas protested, he was arrested, tortured, and ultimately poisoned. In 1996, a U.S. court in the state of Hawaii awarded his heirs a judgment of $43 billion against the Marcos estate, the largest civil award in history. Documents discovered in Malacanang Palace showed that in 1968, President Marcos sent a team of army officers to Japan to make a deal for joint recoveries. According to a member of the team, they met with a prince, quote, a high-ranking Japanese officer, a cousin of Emperor Hirohito, end quote, who told them that Japan had hidden over $100 billion worth of treasure in the Philippines, and it would take more than more than a century to recover it all. A related legal battle was that of former U.S. Deputy Attorney General Norbert Schley. I hope I pronounced that right, who had to fight for his survival after being stung by the U.S. Treasury Department for asking too many questions about Japan's secret M fund. While Schley was indicted, prosecuted, bankrupted, and professionally ruined for trying to negotiate a financial certificate based on the M fund, former Secretary of State Alexander Haig, I hope I pronounced that right. Sorry about that. According to eyewitnesses, went to Japan and negotiated a similar certificate successfully with the help of a personal letter from President George H.W. Bush. Why one man succeeded while the other was destroyed is a chilling story of financial collusion between Washington and Tokyo. Okay, I'm just gonna read the annotations in the back for now. Let's see what, okay, that's, all right. So here's a note on about the recovery of the Japanese loot, Allied recovery of Japanese loot. See chapters 7, 8, and 15. And then the role of John Reed, a note for that. The role of John Reed, Citibank, and Santa Romana gold recoveries. See chapters 10, 13, and 15. And then a note on M Fund and Alexander Haig, or Hag, sorry, butchered that name. See chapter 15. A note about Norbert Schley's legal battle. See chapters 9 and 15. And then note about Roger Rosa's story. See chapters 10 and 15. Okay. Continuing, we have been deeply skeptical about the huge dollar value cited about Golden Lily. Officially, there are said to be about 130,000 metric tons of processed gold in the world, including bullion, coinage, and jewelry. Official records maintain that Asia, with more than 75% of the world's population, holds less than 5% of the total world supply of gold. A statistic that is ridiculous on the face of it. But in the West, at least, the law of gold is drummed into us like the law of gravity. In fact, nobody really knows how much gold there is. We do not know how much was looted by Spain from the New World, because once it reached Europe, much of it was passed on to the great European banking families, the Fuggers. Fuggers, really? There's a family named Fuggers. Wow. Interesting. And Welsers, who had financed the conquest of Mexico and Peru. Whatever the Fuggers and the Welsers did with that gold, they kept very secret. We also have no way of knowing the actual wealth of families like the Krupps, Rothschilds, Oppenheimers, Warburgs, or Rockefellers, except that they have been very rich for a very long time. and their wealth is dispersed in a clever multitude of clever ways. $1 trillion sounds like a lot, but economists tell us today that there are some $23 trillion in the hands of the well-heeled, much of it sleeping in offshore private accounts where banking secrecy and local laws keep these assets hidden from the taxman, spouses, and clients. We know even less about the gold holdings of the great Asian and Middle Eastern dynastic families, trading networks, and underworld syndicates. Western tycoons may own banks and oil companies and influence or control governments, but wealthy Asians never trusted governments or banks, preferring to keep their wealth in small gold or platinum bars and gems. In China, this absolute distrust goes back thousands of years. We can be sure that it was tucked under the rug in Asia over 2,000 years is far more than it has been deposited in US and European banks since Western banking and the gold market as we know it came into existence barely 3 centuries ago. The US government refuses to disclose how much gold it holds, and the last public audit of Fort Knox was in the early 1950s. In short, gold is one of the world's biggest secrets. There are gold reasons. Sorry, there are good reasons for this. The point of our book is not to guess how much was stolen, how much was hidden, how much was secretly recovered, or how much is still waiting to be found. Because of all the lying and deception, the full details may never be known. In this book, in its annotations, and in our 2 archival CDs containing over 900 megabytes of documents, photographs, maps, and other images, we provide hard evidence that huge quantities of war gold remain today in the coffers of international banks such as Citibank, Chase, Hong Kong, and Shanghai Banking Corporation, HSBC, Union Bank Swiss, and others. We provide photocopies of letters, contracts, waybills, state government tax records, insurance covers, and interviews with brokers who carried out Black Eagle deals. Oh, oops, sorry about that. A little sideways there. Okay. All right, continue. We document how a secret trust was set up at Japan's Sanwa Bank, jointly held by General MacArthur and his old adversary, Emperor Hirohito. This account, shown as the Showa Trust after Hirohito's reign title, was so big that by 1982 it was paying nearly $1 billion interest per year. We also have identified one of the 3 trustees of the Showa Trust, and we show how President Marcos discovered the existence of this account and used it to blackmail the government of Japan. We include documents and color photos of major post-war gold recovery operations while they were underway on land and sea. Santa Romana and Lansdale only recovered a portion of the treasure from 1945 to 1947. A decade passed before other significant recoveries occurred as Japanese began coming back to the Philippines alone or in groups to reclaim parts of the hoard. We were given exclusive access to an archive of some 60,000 documents and hundreds of hours of audios and videotapes made or collected over 25 years by American mining expert and metallurgical chemist Robert Curtis, who actually recovered $8 billion in gold bars for President Marcos from Teresa II. After nearly being murdered by Marcos and fleeing the Philippines, Curtis became absorbed by the historical importance of documenting the treasure. In the course of engineering 5 major Golden Lily recoveries for Marcos, Curtis was able to study many of the sites personally in and around the city of Manila, giving him an unrivaled understanding of the techniques employed by Golden Lily engineers. During the months that Curtis worked with President Marcos, he photographed 172 of the 175 original treasure maps. We reproduced several of the maps on our CDs. We also tell the epic saga of Japan's recovery of the Opten Noot, a captured Dutch passenger liner used by Golden Lily to carry treasure safely to Japan under guise of being a hospital ship. After returning to Japan in 1945, she was scuttled by Japanese Navy officers near the Maizuru Naval Base with tons of gold and platinum aboard. Her treasure was recovered in the early 1990s. The names of the Japanese recovery ships and the Australian recovery ship and submersible all are clearly visible in the photographs we produce. We reproduce, taken by one of the participants. Included here are handwritten letters and diagrams showing how a group of senior U.S. government officials and Pentagon generals hope to use Golden Lily treasure to create a new private FBI and military industrial complex controlled by them in partnership with the John Birch Society, the Moonies, and far-right tycoons. This is confirmed by tape recordings of a 1987 conference in Hong Kong that included retired U.S. Army General John Singlaub and General Robert Schweitzer of the National Security Council under President Reagan. As a measure of their common sense, we show readers how their group dug a hole 400 feet deep beneath a kitchen near Manila in the misguided belief that the Japanese had dug a similar hole in 1942 to hide gold bullion. More than 300 feet of this hole was underwater, so the generals and colonels brought in U.S. Navy deep-sea divers and decompression chambers to carry out the recovery. After many months of toil and over $1 million in costs, they found nothing and gave up. We recount a number of equally bizarre misadventures that show why peer review and full disclosure are urgently needed. National security not only shields bureaucrats and hides corruption, it also hides folly. It has taken Holocaust victims nearly 6 decades to recover assets hidden by Swiss banks, to win compensation for slave labor at German corporations like Volkswagen, and to regain possession of art stolen from their homes and offices. Their success, along with the 50th anniversary of the surrender of Japan, encouraged other victims to come forth with valid demands for compensation. This led to unprecedented cooperation among the victims. This last battle of the Pacific War was being waged in California state courts, where surviving POWs, slave laborers, comfort women, and civilian victims filed billion-dollar lawsuits to win compensation so mysteriously denied them after the war. In 1995, it was estimated that 700,000 victims of the Pacific War still had received no compensation. Their numbers are dwindling rapidly because of age and illness. Backing them is an extraordinary coalition of activists and law firms. Britain tried to sidestep this tide of legal discovery by making one-time payoffs to victims to shut them up. Washington took a different approach by moving the California lawsuits to federal courts, where they were blocked by political pressure and intervention by government agencies. The Department of State and Department of Justice are using Article 14 of the 1951 Peace Treaty to prevent POWs and other victims from suing immensely rich Japanese corporations such as Mitsubishi, Mitsui, and Sumitomo. At U.S. Senate hearings in June 2000, Chairman Orrin Hatch of Utah challenged state and justice attorneys about the legitimacy of their claim that the 1951 Peace Treaty canceled all rights of victims. Quote, "You mean our federal government can just say, 'To hell with you, Baton Death Marchers, and you people who were mistreated. We're just going to waive all your rights.' Constitutionally, can our government take away the rights of individual citizens just because they put it in a treaty? We're not asking the Japanese government to pay. We're asking the companies that did the acts to pay. Some of these companies are multi-billion-dollar companies today." Despite such impassioned appeals, on September 21, 2000, U.S. District Court Judge Vaughn Walker ruled against American POWs and other slave laborers. Walker dismissed their suits, saying it was dangerous to upset the diplomatic alliance that existed between America and Japan since the end of the war. Three former U.S. ambassadors to Japan then published a letter in the Washington Post, making the astounding assertion that these American ex-POWs and their attorneys were virtual terrorists. The real issue is conflict of interest. During the Clinton administration, U.S. Ambassador to Japan Thomas Foley was adamant in rejecting compensation for POWs and other slave laborers, insisting that, quote, the peace treaty put aside all claims against Japan, end quote. His deputy chief of mission, Christopher J. LaFleur, echoed this dogma at every opportunity. It was a matter of some interest to victims that Foley's wife was a well-paid consultant to Sumitomo, one of Japan's biggest zaibatsu conglomerates, heavily involved in wartime slave labor and a target of the lawsuits. The moment Foley ended his tenure as ambassador and returned to America, he signed on as a paid advisor and lobbyist to another huge conglomerate, Mitsubishi, one of the biggest wartime users of slave labor. Of greater importance, however, is that LaFleur is married to the daughter of former Prime Minister and Finance Minister Miyazawa, one of the three Japanese who secretly negotiated the 1951 treaty with John Foster Dulles. Miyazawa also is considered by Professor Lessier and others to be the financial overseer of the M Fund. Conflict of interest does not seem to be an obstacle in diplomatic appointments to Tokyo. Today, there is enough evidence of financial collisions between Tokyo and Washington to merit congressional hearings and a General Accounting Office investigation. After half a century of diplomatic lies, corruption, and cover-up, it is time to strip off the fig leaf of national security, which is an insidious form of tyranny. To Congress, to the American people, and to the principles of democracy itself, Washington owes a full and guileless accounting. Just down the coast from Manila in Batangas province is a dramatic treasure site that someday could be turned into a Golden Lily theme park. It has been the target of several Japanese recovery efforts in recent years. Overlooking the South China Sea, it is a big headland with so many tunnels and gun emplacements that it earned the nickname Guns of Navarone. We were asked not to identify the location precisely. This underground complex was started by the Japanese in the early 1920s as part of their long-term strategy for the conquest of the Philippines. It was filled with treasure in 1944. 3 of its tunnels have since been opened by Japanese groups who found trucks loaded with gold bars. They were so happy with what they found in these outer reaches of the tunnels that they went no further. Deeper passages appear undisturbed. Where did all this treasure come from? It all began with Korea. All right, let's finish the annotation for this segment here. Okay. So there's a note about Robert Curtis. Robert Curtis's involvement, see chapters 11, 12, 13, and 14. A note on Sanwa Bank, see chapter 13. A note on Op ten Noord, the Dutch cruise ship, I guess it was. See chapters 5 and 14. A note on General John Singlob and General Robert Schweitzer, see chapters 13 and 14. And a note on the San Francisco Peace Treaty and the cover-up, but see chapter 16. Wow. Wow, this is a long intro. Thank you so much for sticking with us. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm just going to move the camera out a little bit. this will be a very interesting journey about the history of this particular and detective, right? Detective work. Wow, that's amazing. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. And we hope to see you in our book club. And we'll see you next time. You guys all have a great day, great afternoon, great evening, wherever you guys are. Okay, bye bye now.